Okay, let's just jump right in. The title of Senegalese historian Cheikh Anta Diop's book isn't just a title. It's a direct challenge, right? The African origin of civilization, myth or reality. It's throwing down a gauntlet to centuries of history. So in this explainer, we're going to break down the core arguments of this incredibly influential and, yeah, very controversial book. So Diop kicks things off with an image we all recognize, the Great Sphinx. But he wants us to look closer. He's saying, hey, when the first French scientist uncovered it, this is what it looked like. And his analysis, it was totally blunt. He looked at the broad nose, the full lips, and he said, this is African, specifically what he called Bantu, which is a term for a huge group of peoples across sub-equatorial Africa. This one image really sets the stage for his entire argument. And this really boils down to one huge question that drove everything he did. For a long, long time in modern history, the answer to this question was considered a definite no. Well, Diop spent his entire life trying to prove that the answer was actually a resounding yes. But, to really get what Diop was doing, we have to understand what he was fighting against. He made the case that the history of ancient Egypt had been purposefully, systematically whitened by European scholars. This is the exact viewpoint Diop was trying to tear down. This quote is from the brother of Jean-François Champollion, the guy who deciphered the Rosetta Stone. So a big deal. And this idea became the standard, accepted view in 19th century Egyptology, that Egyptians were basically white, totally separate from the black Africans to the south. So why did this happen? Well, according to Diop, you have to look at the time period. The field of Egyptology was just getting started right when the transatlantic slave trade and colonialism were hitting their peak. He argued that for the European mindset of that era, it was just unthinkable, politically and intellectually impossible, to admit that the founders of this incredible civilization were black. So that's what he was up against. How did he respond? He didn't just argue for a little more nuance or, some cultural influence. Nope. He took the whole theory and flipped it completely on its head, with a claim that was as simple as it was explosive. And there it is, straight from the source. For Diop, you see, this wasn't just about Egypt. It was about creating a real, usable, foundational history for all of Africa. He believed that without Egypt as its ancient past, the entire history of the continent just didn't make sense. Now, if you're going to make a claim that big, you better have some serious evidence to back it up. And Diop built this case from a ton of different fields. So let's walk through the main pillars of his research. He really approached this like a detective, pulling together clues from 4 key areas: eyewitness accounts from ancient writers, the Egyptian language itself, biblical stories, and of course, the art and physical anthropology from the remains they left behind. First up, eyewitnesses. Diop put a ton of weight on what ancient writers who actually went to Egypt had to say. He pointed to Herodotus, the father of history, who came right out and described the Egyptians as having dark skin and woolly hair. He even connected them to another people on the Black Sea, who he figured must have been part of an old Egyptian army. Next, he dug into the language. The Egyptians called their own country Kemet. Now, the standard translation is the Black Land, referring to the rich, dark soil from the Nile. But Diop said, nope, you're missing the point. He argued Kemet actually meant land of the blacks, and the root word Kam meant black or burnt, describing the people themselves. Of course, the visual evidence was crucial. Diop's books are just filled with images from Egyptian monuments. Here's Pharaoh Zoser, the guy who built the very first step pyramid. Diop presents this as a clear-cut example of what he called a Negro profile, and he's basically asking the reader, just use your own eyes. What do you see? And here's another one, the head of Taharqa. He was a pharaoh from the 25th dynasty, which is often called the Nubian dynasty. For Diop, rulers like Taharqa weren't foreign invaders. He saw them as Africans from further south who were coming in to restore traditional Egyptian culture, proving just how deep those shared roots really went.
Now, this was one of Diop's most powerful techniques, connecting the ancient past directly to the present. He would put images side by side, like this bust of the famous Ramses II, with photos of modern Africans, in this case, a Watusi man. He was arguing for a direct, visible, physical line. He'd even point out tiny details, like the engravings on the helmet, saying they were meant to show frizzy hair.
This image is so important because it tackles a major counterargument. People would say, well, the Egyptians painted themselves reddish-brown, but they painted Nubians black, so they saw themselves as different.
Diop used reliefs like this one to show that, actually, Egyptians often made no color distinction at all between themselves and other Black Africans.
Okay, so we've seen the argument, but why? Why was this debate so incredibly important to Diop? It's about way more than just an academic squabble. The answer is right there in the title of his preface, The Meaning of Our Work.
This quote gets right to the heart of his entire life's project. He saw history as a tool for psychological freedom. That phrase, Promethean consciousness, it's about reclaiming that sense of your own power, the power to create your own destiny, something he felt had been stripped away from African people. You have to remember, he was writing during the age of decolonization. He argued that the most damaging weapon of colonialism was teaching Africans that they had no history, no science, no philosophy of their own before Europeans showed up. Reclaiming Egypt as African was the ultimate counterpunch to that narrative. So the real takeaway is this. By linking Egypt to the rest of the continent, Diop was arguing that things like Pythagoras' theorem, monotheism, massive architecture, advanced medicine, these weren't ideas imported into Africa. They were part of Africa's own intellectual heritage, a gift from Africa to the world. And that leaves us with one last thing to think about. Whether you end up agreeing with all of Diop's conclusions or not, his work forces us all to face a really powerful question. This debate over who the ancient Egyptians were, it's really a debate about heritage, identity, and who gets to own history. And it's a potent reminder that the stories we tell about the past have a profound impact on who we think we can be in the future.